This is an informative video on 10 things that you should know when building a robot or an attachment with Legos. Discussed in video number 1, we talked about how support is really important. No matter what you're building, you have to be supportive. So, if we were building a house, our house needs to be supported correctly. If it's not a supported, correct structure, it will fall down, and everybody in your house will die. So they don't build houses that way because they don't want people dying. Same thing with bridges. If bridges weren't built structurally sound, and structure means everything, supported correctly, they'll fall and they'll collapse and thousands of people could die. Now, it's not as dramatic here, obviously, in our class because we're only building robots out of Legos. But if your robot collapses, crumbles, falls apart, all of these things could cost you to fail. And it's amazing, but this little guy right here can mean the difference between passing or failing just based on how you use it. This little guy right here is a spacer, a connector that allows two Legos to be connected together. It's also called laminating. So what you do is you take your spacers and you put them into the sides of your Legos, and it'll clip in, and then you put your Legos together, and when you snap it in, you now have a supported structure. One Lego is good. 2 Legos is great. That's probably the most sound structure that you can make as far as Lego is concerned, laminating. So that's number 1. Number 2, wasting supports. If, let's say, you're making connection, an attachment, and you've designed your attachment, and you're using a support to support the bottom of the attachment, like right here. This support could be considered wasted because technically this piece right here is not laminated, which means it doesn't have two Legos attached to it, and therefore this portion of the support is wasted. You can easily use that support for something else and use one of the thin supports to do the same job. Now, to be honest with you, I don't think those thin supports are actually good, and I mean, it's how you want to build this thing. I'm just letting you know that if you're using this on something that's a single structure, then you're wasting this part of the support, and you could use these guys to do the same job. Next, supports not being on top as well as on the bottom is wasting supports. The reason I say that is because without using one on the top, you're not very structurally sound, and then this guy could easily come off without that being there. So let's say I didn't put it there, I could easily pop it off. But with having a support there, both on the top and on the bottom, once also discussed in video number 1, speaking of the sandwich theory, where you have bread and then whatever you have in the middle of it, and then bread on top to kind of support everything, it makes it a little bit stronger. So this is actually stronger. Please refer to video number 1. So don't waste supports. Number 3, what's useful and what's not? What connections will work and what won't work? These 3 things, which are actually the same spacers that I used before to laminate the 2 pieces, you can use these to connect into your actual motor, or your robot. This guy, if this guy has any relevance to the connection part, is going to be worthless because it can easily come on and off. So we don't want to use something like this. Just because this is here doesn't make your robot any more stronger, or doesn't make your attachment any stronger than it was before. It's merely aesthetic. That means it's useless and it just looks pretty. Who cares about that stuff? So make sure that if you're going to use anything on top of it, that you're structurally sounding everything. Like everything here is going to be perfect. So we have to make sure that that happens, and this really is useless. That's number 3. Number 4, chain links. It is amazing how many people have these chain links in their kits and they don't know how to use them. Chain links, just like on a bicycle, attach 2 gears. Gear 1 to gear 2. And that when one gear rotates, it rotates the other gear. Now this is not as strong as having 2 gears attached to each other. Having 2 gears attached to each other is definitely stronger than having the chain link. Okay? But the chain link can be useful to you, so that's the chain link. Number 5, the top. This makes me laugh. This is the top kit of a Class of a team that's being used in one of my classes. And as you can see, all of these areas have barely been touched. This is what we call exploring. You need to explore what these pieces do if you want to succeed here. If there's this much stuff in your kit, you're not exploring enough. This is a team, by the way, in this one of my classes, that has a completed robot and 4 completed attachments, and yet they have yet to use any of these pieces. Just horrible. Absolutely horrible. Please make sure that you're trying to figure out what these guys actually do, because they could be very helpful to you in the future. I will give you a hint. This one right here, amazing what this guy does. You will notice that it has a hole on that side and a hole on that side, which connects 2 axles together. This could be useful to you somehow. We'll get back to that. Next, wheel ratios. A big wheel compared to a medium-sized wheel compared to a small wheel. Each one has its own purpose. It's called wheel ratio. For example, this big wheel. Rotation of the big wheel. 1 rotation of the big wheel gets it about a certain distance. For a wheel half that size, it would take a full 2 rotations to get to that same distance. Whereas a wheel a third of that size will take 3 rotations, or possibly 4 rotations, if it's a quarter of the size, to get that same distance. What that means is, with the bigger wheel, you get faster speed. That also means that you could add bigger gears to your robot. And by adding a bigger gear to your robot and adding for power, you can still have power for your robot and create speed using this wheel. These guys are good for almost all formulas of gear ratios, but this guy is the middle of everything. And then, of course, we have our smallest wheel. With the smallest wheel, of course, we're not getting as much speed, but we will get a little bit more power because it's going to go slower, and the slower you go, the more powerful you have. Think of the difference between a race car and a tank. All right, it's very simple. Unfortunately, with this little wheel, you can't add bigger gears, so you can't be a powerful gear ratio with this wheel, because the gear that you would add, and even I think this gear is actually almost the same size if you look. So that means if the wheel and the gear are the same size, the gear is actually going to hit the ground before the wheel does, and it's going to lose traction and therefore lose power. If you tried to use a bigger gear, there's no way that that would work. All right, so please be aware of that. Next, wire tower. You need a wire tower on your robot, no matter what you do. If the wires get into the wheels, it will force you to fail the event because your robot won't go anywhere. You need something that can come off of the top of your robot. Something that can come off the top of your robot that you can create another thing here to hold the wire out of the wheels, because if the wire gets into the wheels, you're going to have some problems. You're not going to go anywhere. You have to figure out how to connect it and how to build a structure on the top of this to hold the wires out. It's very, very simple. Figure that out. Good luck. Next, the people. I think it's funny how many times kids in the class want to use the little man in the box. The instructions are that you can use any piece that's in your kit. Of course, you can add the people to your robot, but be aware if the people fall off, they can get jammed in your wheels or your gears, or if you use the chains, they'll definitely get jammed in that, and it could cost your robot a victory. However, these people come apart, and therefore you can use their legs or their arms or their head in other areas of your car to create some sort of an attachment. You can also put the people on your car as little mascots, but please make sure that if you're going to do that, that this little guy does not fall off. Lastly, the dumpsters. I laugh about this one because it's something that every kid wants to use, the dumpsters. The dumpsters are okay, and you can use them on your kit, and you can actually connect them both here and on the bottom. You can connect them to somehow on your attachments. But the kids think, oh, dumpsters, they're strong. I'll use those for sumo wrestling. The dumpsters can never be connected to your robot strong enough to stay together if you're using for sumo wrestling, without using a lot of pieces around it. So, If you're going to use a dumpster, you better figure out how to use it without it coming off. Does that mean a dumpster piece is useless? No, there are ways to use the dumpster piece to make it successful. However, it takes a lot of Legos to do that. So if it's taking a lot of Legos to do that and you don't have a lot of Legos in your kit, well, I think you need to restructure your system, recreate, redesign, and rebuild. Good luck to you.